10 vehicles vanished, satellite phones disappeared, and a gold chain mysteriously went missing. But this isn't about stolen property. This is about a trend that could plunge South Sudan back into civil war and affect millions of lives across East Africa. On March 2025, over 200 soldiers died in an attack on a military base in Nasir, South Sudan. Now, suspended First Vice President Riek Machar and 7 others are on trial for murder, treason, and crimes against humanity. The 14th court session just revealed something deeply troubling. Evidence is disappearing. Investigators claim ignorance, and the whole case might be a political hit job disguised as justice. I am breaking down what's really happening in this trial, why missing vehicles matter more than you think. First, you need to understand who Riek Machar is. He is not just any politician. Machar is South Sudan's first vice president and iconic individual during the liberation of South Sudan, and also a former rebel leader who fought against President Salva Kiir in a brutal civil war from 2013 to 2018. That war killed an estimated 400,000 people and displaced millions. The 2018 peace agreement was supposed to end that nightmare. Machar got his position back as first vice president in power-sharing government, an easy peace held until March 2025. The government claims forces loyal to Riek Machar, along with a local militia called the White Army, attacked a military base in Nasir town, Upper Nile State. Over 200 soldiers died. The government arrested Machar, suspended Petroleum Minister Puot Kang Chuol, and 6 others. Now, they are facing charges of murder, treason, and crimes against humanity. If convicted, we are talking about execution or life imprisonment for South Sudan's second most powerful politician. That would shatter the peace agreement and likely restart the civil war. But here's where it gets messy. The trial is happening in Juba, the capital, not where the alleged attack occurred. It's moving incredibly fast, already on its 14th session. And most importantly, evidence is vanishing. So the question everyone's asking, is this a legitimate persecution of war criminals or a political purge disguised as justice? The missing property allegations from the latest court session might give us the answer. During the 14th court session at Freedom Hall, lead defense counsel Dr. Geri Raimondo Legge dropped a bombshell during cross-examination of the lead investigator, Major General Basilio Wani. Defense claimed that at least 10 vehicles disappeared from a defendant Puot Kang Chuol's residence during his arrest. 5 were private and 5 were government-owned, just gone. Nobody knows where they are. But it gets worse. The defense also alleged that items went missing from Machar's house. Thuraya satellite phones, a digital medical watch, books, and documents. And businessman co-defendant Mampaldor allegedly had property seized when national security officers detained him at Juba International Airport, including a gold chain, gold pieces, a bag, and $1,000 in cash. Now, here's the part that should alarm everyone. When questioned about these missing items, the lead investigator, the person supposedly running this entire investigation, testified that he wasn't aware of the 10 vehicles or most of the other seized property. Let me read you his exact words. I'm not aware of the 2 Thuraya satellite phones or the digital medical watch. The only thing I know about are the documents that were seized. Whether those documents were taken in his presence or not, I'm not aware. The lead investigator doesn't know what was seized during the arrest of the country's most high-profile defendant. That's not incompetence. That's either deliberate ignorance or evidence that this investigation is politically motivated rather than professionally conducted. Why does missing property matter so much? Because those Thuraya satellite phones could contain call logs proving or disproving contact with rebel forces. Those documents could be exculpatory evidence. Those vehicles might have GPS data showing whether defendants were anywhere near Nasir during the attack. When evidence disappears in a death penalty case and the lead investigator claims ignorance, you are not looking at justice, you are looking at a show trial. And there's more. The court denied the defense access to the prosecution full case files. They rejected a defense filing over a technicality about the case title. The defense requested the trial be moved to Upper State where the alleged crime occurred, and the court said, no, we are keeping it in the capital where the government controls everything. Every procedural decision is going against the defense. Every piece of evidence that could help them is either missing or being withheld. This isn't starting to look like a political persecution. It is political persecution. Let's get through the legal language and talk about what's actually going on. South Sudan was supposed to hold election in December 2024. They were postponed to 2026. President Salva Kiir has been in power since 2011 and he is not enthusiastic about facing voters. Riek Machar is his main political rival and the only person with enough military backing to challenge him. The power sharing agreement forced Kiir to give Machar the vice president position, but Kiir never wanted to share power. He just wanted to stop the civil war that was destroying the country and cutting off international aid. Now, conveniently, just as elections approach, there is an attack blame on Machar forces. Machar gets arrested, suspended from office, and put on trial for crimes that carry the penalty death. And one of the co-defendants is the petroleum minister, Puot Kang Chuol. That detail matters. South Sudan's entire economy runs on oil. Control the petroleum ministry, control the country's wealth. This isn't just about eliminating a political rival. It's about consolidating control over resources. Did the Nasir attack happen? Certainly yes. But why did it happen? It happened because the civilians in that area, unlike other places in South Sudan, endured military intimidation and killing for over 7 years since 2018. It happened because the government sent additional forces to disarm the local militia by sending local militia. Probably over 200 soldiers died. That's on the government. And that might not be fabricated. But here's the critical question. Were Riek Machar and these defendants actually responsible, or is the government exploiting a real tragedy to eliminate opposition? The missing evidence, the rushed proceedings, the denial of defense rights, the investigators' convenient ignorance, all of this suggests the government decided on the verdict before the trial even began. And there's precedent for this. Kiir and Machar have been fighting for power since 2013. They've signed simple peace agreement, and Kiir has repeatedly accused Machar of planning coups. In 2016, fighting broke out in Juba between their forces while they were supposedly sharing power. Machar fled the country and came back only after international pressure. This trial is just the latest chapter in power struggle that's defined South Sudan's entire existence as an independent nation. Except this time, instead of armies fighting openly, we have courtrooms being weaponized. So let me be clear about what's at stake here. If Machar is convicted, the 2018 peace agreement collapses totally. South Sudan's descends back into civil war. We are talking about a country where 2/3 of the population already depends on humanitarian aid to survive, where millions have been displaced, where famine has repeatedly threatened. Another civil war doesn't just affect South Sudan. Refugees flood into Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Sudan, all of which already face their own crisis. Sudan itself is in a civil war right now. Ethiopia just emerged from the civil war in Tigray and is facing internal fractures. The entire East African region is powder cake, and South Sudan relapsing into violence could ignite broader regional conflict. And then there is this international dimension. China has major oil investments in South Sudan. The United States has spent billions trying to stabilize the country since supporting its independence in 2011. If this trial is perceived as illegitimate, which the missing evidence strongly suggests, international support for Kiir's government evaporates. Aids get cut, sanctions get imposed, and without international backing, Kiir can't maintain control, which means more violence. There's also a broader question about democracy in Africa. South Sudan was supposed to be a success story, the newest nation born from a referendum where 99% of people voted for independence. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about how liberation movements often become oppressive governments. This trial is testing whether African nations can transition from strongman rule to genuine democracy, or whether power only changes hands through violence. Right now, the answer looks depressingly familiar. So what actually happens next? There are 3 realistic scenarios, and none of them are great. Scenario number 1 is that Machar is convicted and sentenced to death or life imprisonment. The peace agreement dies. SPLAIO rebels, civil war restarts, tens of thousands more die. This is the worst case scenario, but given how the trial is proceeding right now, it's increasingly likely. Scenario number 2 is that international pressure forces a negotiated settlement. Machar is convicted on lesser charges but immediately pardoned or given house arrest. He is politically neutralized but not martyred. Kiir consolidates power, elections get postponed again indefinitely, and South Sudan becomes a de facto one-party state. Violence stays localized rather than nationwide, but democracy is dead. Scenario number 3, mounting evidence of a sham trial causes such international outcry that charges are dropped or Machar is acquitted. But this doesn't solve anything. Kiir still controls the military and security services. Machar returned to his position but with even more distress. The power-sharing government limps along, paralyzed and dysfunctional until something else triggers the next crisis. Notice what's missing from all 3 scenarios: a peaceful, democratic resolution where elections happen fairly and South Sudan moves forward as a stable nation. That option seems often off the table entirely. So most likely, the outcome is scenario number 2, a negotiated settlement where Machar is convicted but not executed, allowing Kiir to claim victory while avoiding the immediate outbreak of war. The trial becomes leverage in backroom negotiations, not an actual search for justice. But even that scenario just delays the inevitable. South Sudan's fundamental problem isn't one attack or one trial. It's that the country's political elite would rather fight for power than build a functional state. And the people suffering most are ordinary South Sudanese who just want peace. So here's what we know. 10 vehicles disappeared, evidence vanished. The lead investigator claims ignorance, and South Sudan's fragile peace hung by a thread. This trial isn't about justice. It is expelling the only opposition leader from the country's activities. The missing property allegations from this court session aren't just a legal footnote. They are evidence that South Sudan's government is more interested in eliminating rivals than building democracy, and the international community's silence is deafening. For the millions of South Sudanese who have endured decades of war, displacement, and suffering, this trial represents their hopes for peace being ground up in a political machine that doesn't care about their lives. I'll be following this case closely and bringing you updates as it develops. If you want to understand what's really happening in Africa beyond the headlines, subscribe, drop a comment with your thoughts on whether this trial is legitimate or political theater, and share this video because mainstream media isn't covering this story with the in-depth it deserves. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.